Just like to welcome you all to the council meeting of Tuesday the 20th of August. Just to let you know that the meetings nowadays are live streamed and the video is available on YouTube should you wish to see yourselves or remember what somebody has said. Members, please speak into your microphones and only one speaker at a time for clarity. And it's probably a good idea to turn mobile phones onto silent. Just because we've got a group of people here today, I'd just like to welcome you especially as well and just run through the first couple of things that are going to happen. And first of all, we'll be calling for apologies. Then we have Mr. Jim McKinley speaking in the public forum. Then we just discuss any late items or confidential items being transferred into the open. And then we'll call for the petition to be presented. So it's probably about 15 minutes before we'll be getting to the matter of that petition, just to give you a bit of an idea there. So thank you, Jim. You've got 10 minutes and there might be some questions if you happen to finish early. Just see how it goes. Thank you.
Your Worship, the Mayor, elected members, good morning and thank you for giving me the time today. I'm a commercial real estate broker and I represent a group with an interest in this site. The council have had a vision for a hotel on this site for at least 5 years, or 5 councils rather. It's been advocated by Bay of Plenty Tourism, Priority One, Chamber and many others. Many have tried to realise it over the time and me being one. There was a 2005 vision, looking a bit dated. It's still in the transformational plan there, number 9, still looking for a developer and operator to be confirmed. The reason I'm here today is that I have been told that there is a new proposed use for this site to build a low-rise office accommodation for council people. Why is this site important? Basically because it's the only site that you can build a major high-rise hotel on. A hotel has to be built within that 49-metre zone, so that's area 1, the dark area. And it basically has to be built above the 10-metre contour, which was my squiggly red line. And just going around that, the council, that area there, council car park, is basically too difficult technically to build a high-rise on. That obviously is all the university block. That's courts and government too hard. Well, it's occupied, but it's blocked by, that's the Durham Street Motel. It's blocked by the Chambers, the King's Tower rather. Most of these other sites are too small, or getting down here, they're too close to that 2-metre zone on Spring Street, which is getting problematic. So basically, this is the only site in the CBD that you can realistically build a hotel. Now, council's got a lot of land here, but the only stuff that you can build high-rise on is those 3 sites there, the Green Park, or these 2 sites here. All this down here is has to be built low-rise, raft construction, just because of the geotechs. And there's about 8,000 square metres down the bottom. Proposal for council, or the proposal being discussed around council at the moment, is to build a low-rise over that for council offices over that whole block. Now there are alternatives here for council offices. They could build on that site, and the floor plate there would be as big as 306 Cameron Road. So it'd be you could build a medium rise there. You could build a low rise across here, because say that's all you can build is low rise on this land here. You could build a low rise with 8,000 square metre floor plate if you wanted, but certainly 4. The proposal would be to like a 3,500 square metre floor plate across that whole site, maybe 3,000. That's say that whole area is 8,000 square feet, so square metres. So just reinforcing that's the only viable site in the city where you can build a hotel. Why would a hotel work now when we've been trying for 5 council sessions to make it work? Well, the world has changed considerably. Interest rates are down, yield expectations are down, occupancy rates up. Hotels are being built all around the country now. You see hotels built in Manukau and places, which you might not normally have seen. So there is it is feasible, and further to that, I represent a group who want to build a hotel. The very well-known developer, we've got an end owner, world-class operator. There's an offer in front of council to purchase the site at fair value. So there's an offer to construct to proceed with this proposal. I'm not here to talk about that proposal particularly, but just in general terms, it would be a 180-room hotel, 4+ star, be a major brand operator. There'd be conference rooms, there'd be restaurants, there'd be all the normal trappings of a hotel. No apartments attached. It'd just be 24/7 proper hotel. And clearly there's impact for the city. CBD is looking a bit sad at the moment, and something like this would give a massive lift to the CBD, to the particularly sitting there, where people overnight would naturally flow down into the city. So my basic proposal to you is why would the site not be developed to its full potential, and why would a hotel vision be abandoned when finally it's now feasible? And that's basically the guts of my presentation. And I'm happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Jim. I'll just check Councillor Clout.
Thank you very much, Jim. You mentioned that the site on Devonport Road was not feasible. Is that purely geotech from your perspective? Because you pointed to that map.
Sorry. Essentially, I think we're all aware that the Farmers hasn't been an easy site to develop. This is on the edge of a cliff. And I think we all remember the Devonport Towers, the issues with some of us were around at the time, remember the Devonport Towers foundation problems. The big problem with building on these sort of sites is that basically no contractor or developer will give you a set price to do the job. No one knows what it's going to cost. If major excavations on that site, your biggest problem on that site would be, with a major excavation, would be to stop regional health falling into the hole. So it's just too problematic.
Yeah, thank you. That was an interesting presentation. I'm not aware of having seen a full proposal with regard to the site from your group. I speak as a councillor, and certainly not one that outlines what the offer is. Are you familiar with the contract that some of my colleagues, by majority, enthusiastically signed with the Wellington company Willis Bond? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
The contract's publicly available on our website.
We have all been poring over that contract. I think there are a couple of issues here. I have actually prepared a slide. Basically, as I see it, the Willis Bond Agreement is designed for assets which finish up in public ownership, and Willis Bond is the non-contestable developer for anything that's on council land and is designed to finish up in council land. The fact is, Willis Bond are not a natural hotel developer and don't want to be a hotel developer, and I'm pretty sure that the council doesn't want to be a developer, owner or operator of a hotel. So therefore clause 5 of that agreement I don't think ever comes operative. And I think that's the key element there. So in that case, Willis Bond's role in this thing basically comes back to being a purely a consultant, and is required to assist council with its choosing objectives. But so that's part of the question. Why hasn't it come forward? Basically, we've tried to talk to Willis Bond, and they don't want to talk to us. They would rather, they basically would rather, oops, why have I gone off? I turned it off.
So just supplementary to that, Councillor Robson, and I'm going to keep moving around the others. I want to ask a question. Yeah. But we need to speed up the process.
Sorry, through the chair, this is a significant topic. I feel that in the context of what we're talking about here, a full answer from the gentleman to whom I placed the question, is required, and if he's prepared to offer it, I'd like to hear it.
What's the part that I haven't answered?
We haven't seen enough.
Basically, I think the council's we've presented to council, and basically it's got stuck. Mainly because of the agreement, and we can't talk to Willis Bond, or they won't talk to us, and they've come up with basically an alternate use for the site, which means that it would, which I think is designed so that it falls into their bailiwick. If that goes to office type use, then it falls back into their bailiwick. I think there is one other thing I could add to that. If the council decides to sell this land for the purpose of a hotel, then it falls outside the Willis Bond agreement. But that's an initiative the council has got to take. Willis Bond certainly won't take that initiative.
Supplementary, if I can. Thank you, Your Worship. And it's a question through you, I imagine, to the Chief Executive or staff. We've just received some information with regard to, how can I put it, how the contract that was signed with Willis Bond, open brackets, Tauranga, close brackets, 2018 Limited, may be interpreted. Can we get some advice from staff now, or perhaps a time when we can get some advice from staff about staff's view of how that contract entered into by slim majority would be interpreted?
Through the chair, the answer is yes, we can provide that advice, but it won't be now.
The question was, if we can't have it now, can we have a when on would it be provided?
Yeah, it'll be provided when council consider the future use of that land.
Okay, which is scheduled for?
I think it's the 10th of September.
Thank you.
Okay, a quick question, Councillor Granger, and then we need to...
Thanks for sharing your concept. Quite interesting, actually. Just one question. Car parking. Had you included a certain amount of car parking, and if so, to what amount?
There's either one or two floors of car parking we'd put into the floors numbers. I can't quote numbers at the moment for it, but hotels are not too difficult with car. Well, most of your car parking requirements are overnight, and use of public car parks is quite probably practical over that time.
Okay, final question, Councillor Baldock.
Thanks, Jim. You've mentioned all these iterations of the hotel on that site. Do you currently have an architect that has given you new concepts, or the ones that you're planning to work with at the moment?
Yes, there are plans that have been developed, and they've been fully costed, and we've been working on this for a long, long time. So we do have a full spec ready to go. We have some reluctance putting it forward until we get a clear direction from council as to how to proceed.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for coming in and presenting your case. Now, any late items? I don't believe there are. There were no apologies, by the way. Earlier I didn't call for them, but I should have, and there are no apologies. Any confidential business to be transferred into the open? And any change to the order of business? Declarations of conflicts of interest? Okay, though that being the case, we're welcoming Janet to come and take over the chair where Jim was speaking and to present the petition.
Excuse me, Your Worship, just while that's happening, in confidential DC 230, I will sit down from that one. Sit back.
Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Janet, and I've come this morning to give some background to the petitions that you have in front of you. Now, I've got a Scottish accent, so I'll try to read slowly. Okay. The petitions have been submitted by Althorpe, Havenbrook, Orange Grove retirement villages in the Pies Pa area, as well as the Good Local, Artisan Bakery, Royal Taste India, Super Value, Pies Pa Pharmacy, Childcare, Aquatic Centre, Flex Fitness within the Pies Pa shopping complex. The background to the petitions are: 1, I was sitting at the bus stop across from the shopping centre area when a couple of residents from Althorpe, where I belong to, crossed the pedestrian crossing. They crossed over the first part and Jean stopped there, but her husband decided to cross the second part using a walking stick. And he just got his feet safely to the other side as a huge truck, and it was huge, came barreling down the road immediately behind him. Claire, the manager at Althorpe, stated that she had also witnessed some near misses. Second, while waiting for my bus one day into town, I decided to count the traffic coming down Pies Pa past me. In less than 10 minutes, I counted 85 large trucks and cars barreling down the road. Only 2 times could anyone cross over with any modicum of safety. Waiting at the same bus stop, I decided on another day to count the traffic going up the road. In the same 10 minutes, I counted 80 trucks and cars going up the road or turning into the shopping complex. With the speed limit as is, this is a very dangerous crossing, especially for those with lessened mobility, use of walking stick or walker, and mothers with strollers and accompanying children. For these reasons, after consulting with managers of the various venues, I instigated petitions at all of the above-mentioned facilities. I did the shopping centre because I thought it was easier, probably more beneficial than trying to knock at doors in the area. Okay, our request is, from the needs assessment by observation and by the amount of signatures contained in the petitions, it is strongly suggested that in the interests of safety for all children and adults, that the speed limit is lowered somewhere at suitable locations on Pies Par Road, so that safety will be enhanced in the areas surrounding the shopping complex. It should also be noted that many school children from Aquinas College walk down the road, cross over the entrance to the shopping complex, and use the pedestrian crossing. It is therefore, for all the reasons stated, also requested that the pedestrian crossing has painted lines on both sides of the road to facilitate safer crossing at this juncture. Another consideration might be given to speed bumps at entrance to the shopping complex. In summary, therefore, we request that traffic speed is lowered at appropriate places on Pies Par Road, that painted lines be provided at the pedestrian crossing adjacent to the shopping complex, and speed bumps at entrance to the shopping complex. Thank you for any consideration given and possible solutions to these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was actually very easy to understand, so you've well spoken. Thank you. Now, any councillors got a question, or Councillor Bullock, you've had a bit of involvement with this?
I just thought maybe a question to Martin Parks, please, to just clarify something that Janet has said about pedestrian crossings. Can you clarify, when there is a 60k limit, whether it's feasible to put in crossings unless it's reduced to 50? And around that Pies Par area, though there are median strips, there are safety, what do we call them? Refuges in the middle, there's actually no painted lines, I think is what Janet's referring to.
Through the chair, in response to Councillor Baldock, firstly I'd just like to say thank you for the petition and raising the issue. It's good to have sort of so much local interest in this issue. With regard to formal pedestrian crossings, which we'll call zebra crossings in this instance, the 60k limit is actually too high for us to safely implement a formal pedestrian crossing at that particular location. So what we would do is wrap up the request for a pedestrian crossing in with a speed limit review. So it's all done as one package of safety measures.
The precursor to having a crossing is to see the limit reduced to 50, and then we can possibly look at the crossings going in. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Janet. You are an amazing petition warrior in Pies Par. In case people don't know, Janet also presented the petition about the public transport buses for within Pies Par, and has done great work there.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, through the chair, to Martin. In an email here, we were due to commence a city-wide review of speed limits in 2017, and I just wonder how far we progressed that since that email.
Through the chair, a number of reasons have stalled the citywide review. Government legislation and criteria and guidelines have stalled in the main, but also our resourcing internally. So when there was a petition, I think it was a few weeks ago, about Tara Road, and I mentioned to council then that we are hoping to secure a resource to support the rollout of this citywide review. That resource is just about all but secured now, and we hope to commence the review probably, I would say, towards the end of September, October time. But this involves a huge amount of work right across the city, so it's quite a task.
And just to follow up, please, the time frame for completing that review and implementing the speed changes would be how long?
It's through the chair, it's probably difficult to put a time frame on it at this stage until we know the extent of the work required. I would say it's going to be at least 12 months of data gathering, information gathering, but the main part of the work is going to be engagement with the community. that's where I suspect we might get some kickback from some areas of the community. Speed is a very emotive subject. People have got their own opinions about what the speed limit should be past their house where they live, or where they work, or where their children go to school. Others might not agree with it. So there's a huge amount of work to be done in that community engagement space.
One more question, Mr. Chair, if I could. It may be helpful, Janet, just for everyone to understand how many retirement homes, villages on that stretch of Piespo Road from Barks Corner to the shops, where people need to cross the road for bus stops and things like that, I think.
We've got Althorpe, which is huge now. There's about 300 people, residents in there. Havenbrook and Orange Grove. I think that's them all, up to the shops.
Lots of the Althorpe people who live near that end of the big complex use that little gate to get out rather than Chain Road, don't they?
Yeah, we do, and it's difficult. I mean, I almost got killed one night, but it was my own fault, really. When we come out from Althorpe, we've got to cross over. There is another gate that we can use as pedestrians, but anyway, this particular night, if I'm coming off the bus on the other side of the road, if I've been in town or somewhere else, and I'm coming over the crossing there, if I'm going into the shops, I've got to cross over the main bit of the shopping area. And what I did that night was there was a lot of cars coming out, and I decided I could go between them because there was plenty of time. However, I checked the road down the way, and I forgot the one coming down the other side, and so somebody was coming, but they were able to stop for me. But it's just a dangerous part there, and when the cars come up the road, they just shoot into the shopping centre. You know, they turn off quickly. All the traffic's going fast, real fast down the road. And when you come off the bus, it's difficult to get a space of time to get over. You can get over halfway, but that's difficult. And then you've got to watch for the next lot to get over again. And I mean, I've got my mobility, but there's a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. And there's a lot of elderly in Althorpe. I would say there's a few in the 60s, but most of us, there was 70s, a lot in the 80s, and even the 90s. And they're all starting to lose mobility. So that was, it just concerned me, you know, when I saw the person cross the road that day, and I gave him a big lecture when he got over.
Oh dear.
I did, I gave him a big lecture. I said, don't you ever do that again, John. But, you know, it was close. It really was close. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Janet, for coming in. Thanks also those that have come to support you. I'll get a councillor to move receipt of the...
Yeah, thank you.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Stewart. Okay, so any discussion at this stage on that? Okay, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, so that's carried. Now, to let you know what happens, our staff will take that on board. They'll do the necessary studies and consultation, and we'll see if we can't get some result that's going to please. I wanted to say please everybody, that's always an impossibility, but we'll see what we can do there. So thank you very much. Okay, going on to the rest of the meeting, and I just probably opportune to remind people that we've got 3 meetings today. We've got the council meeting, following that we have the urban form and transport, and following that the policy, I believe, if I've got the order right, but there are different speakers coming in at different times. So we may have to adjourn these meetings to allow the other meetings to hear different speakers. So just to explain that. So without further ado, a presentation from Jeff Canham on National Park Cities. Welcome, Jeff.
Te whare e tūnei, te tamatea po kai whenua, e tā koutou nei, nā rangatira, nā hau e whā, nā nai tamarawaho, e tau nei tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning. My name's Jeff Canham, and I'm here on behalf of EnviroHub, and I'm here to share an exciting initiative that's happening for the first place in New Zealand in the Bay of Plenty, the Bay of Plenty National Park. My presentation is to take you through what that is all about and some things that are surprising as our species might find to be hearing about it to have to reconnect with. So what would it be like to live in a park? We're very familiar with these great national parks, and we have the best in the world. It's curious that most people, with their 2 or 3 weeks of the year when they're not working, that time when they save up and plan many months in advance, often a year in advance, go to with what resources they have to have a good time. We have a draw to be close to or within beautiful surroundings, to regenerate, to feel good, to make happy memories, and we'll snatch this time and we'll guard it, and we'll get to these places, and they are inherently usually beautiful places. Whether they're here, they require great effort in national parks, or they're places like Rarotonga in winter. We're a species that is at our best in beautiful surroundings. When we go to our happy place, we often think of our favourite park, our favourite green space, where we used to live, a place that makes us happy. When we're stressed, we want to get away from it all, we tend to end up in places of green, of nature, of beauty. And you ask most people, and they'll have a place like this. But let's consider where we live. And there's a question here: where would you feel safer? The people who study vegetation the most in the world is the US National Park Service. They've studied the entire US landscape since the 1950s. They've used old-fashioned aerial photography. They've gone all the way through to satellite imagery, and since then, for the last 60, 70 years, they've studied vegetation loss across the United States. And it's incredibly scientific and bureaucratic. And what do you need that for? Well, it's not just national parks or commercial forests, it's the cities as well. And again, what's that information for? Well, the people who use it the most, who use the largest world's body of research in terms of vegetation cover in the United States, is the FBI. And the FBI use that because that's where they put their resources. In urban environments where there's less vegetation or vegetation is removed, they will literally set up a new office in that environment because they know that's where the work's coming from. There's a direct relationship between the loss of canopy cover, vegetation and the lack of plants in places where we live, and crime. And this is a big subject, and it's another presentation, but it's statistically perfect. The more vegetation outside a residence, the lower the crime rate. We know about the benefits of vegetation. We know about shelter and shade and scale and habitat, and heck, the plants make air. This is great. Often a food source. We like nature. We're at our best in nature. Strangers greet each other in the street. Most places in the world, it's a crisis. Most places in the world, big cities, they're planting more and more plants and trees to try and cool their city environments down, because if you're in Melbourne, when it got to 47 degrees last time, 653 people died that day when it got to 47. When it gets to 50 degrees, and that's the day they're predicting in the next 8 years, they know that 1,000 people will die that day in their city from heat. And blessed is New Zealand, because we don't have those issues. But in terms of vegetation, we know all about the other things. We can use less energy in our homes, the shade is good, and we have shelter in winter. And people like to live in a beautiful environment. The thing about that is that the good neighbourhoods and bad neighbourhoods, just to get us moving through this, good neighbourhoods tend to correlate with well-vegetated streets, avenues, higher property values, and it directly relates to the amount of canopy cover. But looking at the other side of that, quick example in Chicago, in 2005, the CPD abandoned every single crime prevention program in favour of buying trees, and they bought 500,000 trees that year and planted them in Chicago with the support of the mayor, for the very reason to change their system in Chicago. And this is something which is a huge subject, and we can do this all day. But curiously, New Zealand is doing the complete opposite to what the US is doing in respect for planting vegetation in places where we live, simply to reduce crime. But there's other benefits. Simply, it's human habitat selection, and we're going to get onto why where we live, and perhaps living in a park, a national park, is going to become really significant to your public. What is really a good neighbourhood? And it's interesting to see what real estate agents think of that. I would reflect as a parks manager around the world, our open space strategies are moving way beyond park boundaries and way beyond simply environments where we would have measures for how many playgrounds and how much of a walk it is between parks. Singapore already has a canopy cover figure of 47%. They have 72 hectares of rooftop garden and they're climbing. London has a 50% canopy cover commitment. Melbourne wants 40% by 2040, and the whole movement of livable cities is significant to us as a species. Of our 6 billion, about 87% of the population live in cities, and by 2050, 3/4 of the world's population will live in cities. And there's some other stats there as well. The movement worldwide it's a public movement. It's a ground-up, grassroots, systems change approach to putting nature back into where we live, and it's a leadership space. This is a document which I've presented to this council before, and if it was your own money, you'd simply invest in more parks because your surrounding city and environment simply becomes worth more. You hit your full well-beings really well. It's great. But look at the very defined boundary on that map of where Central Park finishes and the urban environment starts. What if the park could leap beyond that boundary? And that's what the National Park Cities movement is all about. It's not necessarily about the council having to do more or spend more. It's about a movement where it's private businesses realising that we're at our best in good human habitat surroundings. This street in London is not a main street. It's off not far from Oxford Street. In spite of myself, I found myself walking more slowly down that street, spending more time there. And again, in spite of myself, I found myself in a shoe shop and incredibly buying shoes. I chose to dwell in that shoe shop and that street and sat outside and enjoyed the birds and the trees. And I had to remind myself that I was in the middle of London. And it was a really good place to be. Why did I want to get into retail therapy at the same time? Well, I just enjoyed being there. My foot count, I guess, was slower. I spent more time there. And it was reflection right back to the original brief for the Project Edgewater for this Tauranga CBD that was meant to do stuff like that once. Going out throughout London, a national park city, it's interesting to see that every square metre, every opportunity counts. And this is another example of a green wall. And the English have always done baskets really well. But it's actually the side benefits, the better mental health, the better cognitive stamina, the fact there's more nature coming back into cities, and goodness we need it. And again, it's simple things. It's just baskets and plants. There's New Zealand natives all through these gardens, but it's actually simple to do. And if you take every opportunity, it's amazing what you can do. But what if you don't and can't do a green wall? Goodness knows with our untreated timber and leaky buildings, why would you stick plants on the side of the things? But here's an example from Auckland, and this is an endangered native plant, Tecamanthus speciosa, growing up a climbing frame. It's the tallest plant of that kind in the world, and it's done simple with stormwater off the roof. That sort of thing has had immense building benefits, and it's the sort of thing you can do instead of murals, and instead of wondering how you're going to put trees into environments that are just going to wind people up. There's other options. And cities around the world are doing this, and it's a good place to engage with the community. A quick look at Rolls-Royce. About 8 to 10 stories up in the park, Royal is in fact those 2-story trees growing on a ledge. And, you know, this is Singapore, not a computer-generated image. And the telling thing in these pictures in Singapore is that there's very few grass berms. They treat grass berms that are mown as a wasted planting opportunity to get more nature, more plants into these environments. And it would be my evidence and some of my research that it's probably cheaper to plant berms instead of mow them if you make the right public horticulture choice. And so on. You know, you can be Rolls-Royce and you can get some of the stuff in here. The trees on top of that boat are about 20 metres tall. You can do anything with nature. There is a nature-based solution for everything. But, you know, it's not just about treating plants as things that go into plant zoos or having to afford big entry fees to go and see nature. Is that really where we've reached as a peak of our civilization? Perhaps not. It's fun, but here's something more simple. This tree trail in Singapore is something we could do here, and it's an example of a national park city. We've got these trees in Tauranga, and internationally people do these tree walks. They walk around, they get told a story. We should be a nation of storytellers. We're good at it. We've got a great Traveller's Palm down the Strand. We've got the trees at the Lyceum Club. It'll be a great inner city walk. But onto the National Park City movement. I was really fortunate as an EnviroHub board member to be sponsored to go to London and to be at the initial launch, or the international launch of this worldwide movement with 10 founding cities. We're the only New Zealand one in the Bay of Plenty National Park City, more of a region. The other one in the southern hemisphere is Adelaide, and at the moment we're way ahead of them. So what is it? What is a national park city? Well, we presented Mayor Brownless's letter to Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, to his staff. He, in his office, launched this movement, and that's the Tower Bridge behind. Internationally attended, it is a reflection of the groundswell that is coming from our public. That is the international charter which myself and Laura Ragg signed from EnviroHub, so the Kiwis were represented at the beginning. And overall it was a summit of a kind of an international movement between representatives from not just countries but IUCN funders and international environmental movements. And to prove I went there, that's the money shot. We really did go to my sponsor. But what is Bay of Plenty National Park? Well, we are in the Bay of Plenty. It's in our name, it's in our nature. We're at the cusp of a project which will see us undertake some very close conversations with Tangata Whenua to talk through what we are trying to land with our messages, which I think we will find Tangata Whenua, our treaty partner, may feel we're catching up more than meeting of minds. But it's a greener environment. It's where we live. It's making nature part of our life. It's being the first in New Zealand, and it's joining the rest of the world being a livable city and embarking on some really simple messages that will come from our public. It's a reconnection, it's a rewilding, it's bringing wildlife back into where we live. And what's in it for us? Well, everything. We live better, we're healthier, we're better socially, and it's the sort of things that the council doesn't have to do. It's what the public will do. It's a bottom-up, grassroots movement. And people follow feelings, not ideas. They'll follow what they want to do. It won't be the most compelling, most phrase-literate campaign. It'll be about how it feels. It's a chance to connect with Rongoa Maori, with native plants, to heal the land and us, because we live on the land. Our relationship with nature is probably quite broken. We'll be creating sanctuaries for bees and other wildlife, and all those things that we're used to. Goodness knows, how on earth would we have ever imagined 10 years ago getting rid of plastic bags? But I would not have imagined standing around a barbecue with my less government ute driving, hunting neighbours talking about predator control on a street level and admonishing each other for not filling out our forms. Things do change. It is a journey to greenness, but it is something which, as I would say, a parks manager, we're seeing more and more focus on the environment where we live as opposed to parks being the places where we solve nature and where we go to. The problem with national parks is that they're not necessarily something with people in them. We've set them aside. 200 years ago, the parks movement represented a lot of the features and principles in this movement. It's very, very similar. I think now's the time to maybe not see nature as happening somewhere else, but where we are. It's about making individual contributions to nature at a personal level. And if every person dealt with 1 square metre of their own, where they live, things would be much better. I'll just quickly skim through some final images of where we live and maybe some of the key concepts. This is more of a movement that honours people and not so much parks and the land. It's about nature probably being a human right. It's asking, what do we need from our landscape? And what does a city need from nature to sustain itself? Leaders need to share a vision of a good future, and because people don't follow ideas and they follow feelings, sharing a vision for a good future is probably more about optimism and hope. And if you've got a job as a leader, it's probably reinforcing those messages. If I could be so bold to quickly quote or paraphrase Nelson Mandela, we make better choices when they're made out of the reflection of our hopes as opposed to our fears. National Parks Cities is a collective and enlightened self-interest movement. Yes, it is what's in it for us. It is about our future. It's another way of engaging with people that lets people relate to their surroundings. And if it feels good, people will follow. We're at an early step in our process. We're about to really launch this and go and consult. But it is something which we will lead in the Bay of Plenty. I'm reminded of a saying that I work with a lot, and it's Ngā tō roro, ngā taku roro, kia ora, kai te iwi. With your basket and my food basket, the people will thrive. Thank you.
So, any questions for Jeff? Councillor Bullock?
Thanks, Jeff. When you talk about the cover, the percentage cover that Singapore at 47, how do they establish that? Is it simply a satellite down image of how much tree cover there is over the actual land, or how do you establish that? That sounds like an awful lot.
Through the chair, yes, it is an awful lot. With satellite imagery, they've literally not so much just trees. It's canopy cover meaning green. So they've also got 72 hectares of rooftop garden as well. So yeah.
So does it include backyards with grass as well?
Yes. So it's about where people live,
Okay.
properties as well. Yep.
So do you have any idea on Tauronga's percentage?
I don't exactly, but it's something which I know the staff have been working on or wanted to. Yep.
Just ask Mark for a follow-up on how many, because we're looking at a policy thing soon which has the number of notable trees, but the street trees that we manage is how many?
Good morning, through the chair. We manage approximately just over 38,000 trees in our in the land that TCC administers. We're hoping to bring to you during the LTP to consider our measures, maybe something that reflects something along the lines of these discussions. We could measure the tree canopy in the city area by using LiDAR. So you'd use a plane, you'd fly it, and it's a technique that our GIS team could then measure subsequently. But we haven't done it yet. We haven't made a commitment to do it.
Thank you, Jeff, for your presentation. Can you please leave a copy of it with our committee advisor? Thank you.
Further questions? I'm happy to move that we receive the presentation. Oh, sorry, Councillor Malloy. Yeah.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you very much for that presentation. Much appreciated. Hey, internationally, is there a recommended level of trees per population? Like we've got 136,000, I believe. We just heard they've got 38,000 trees. Is there any standards there that of best practice in terms of vegetation per population for us to measure ourselves by?
Through the chair, there's a lot of great standards, but I think the secret is a systems change with your community. If I'm guided by First in Show, which I think is Melbourne City, they're doing it street by street. So they're getting down and speaking to people, and some streets are early adopters and they want a beautiful street, and they want more trees, they want places to play, and they're the streets that the council works with first.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Like your green shirt too, by the way. That's very nice. Yeah. Hey, look, just coming back, I just couldn't get my head around you mentioned about the crime rate being lower in vegetation areas. Can we throw that back up on the screen again? Interested in that. Yes, just go back the other way. That's it.
Yeah.
That one?
Yep.
Have you got any figures on that, or is that just something you've plucked out of somewhere? Can you give a bit of an idea?
So the reference at the top is, I've actually brought these people out to New Zealand to speak and do a speaking circuit because the evidence is compelling, and it's a longitudinal study. It's been so practically implemented that the Chicago Police Department basically follow it. I was pretty incredulous when I went to the States in 2005, sponsored by a US government department, to study this. And it's interesting when you've got the mayor of Chicago, Daley, at that stage, actually running a whole series of presentations on how it's changed their city. And it's quite remarkable. My prejudice was, well, when you plant a small tree, it'll get vandalised, so how is that going to reduce crime? But working with the city people and seeing this firsthand, it is remarkable that we're a species that is quite linked to nature, and we live somewhere beautiful. When we're a part of making that better, it seems to deal with that. So yeah, it's quite an exciting piece of research.
Can we get some more information on that, especially like you say from Chicago?
Through the chair, absolutely. On your time, I actually went to Chicago to do this, so I've still got the information. So I'll supply it. Yeah.
Mr. Capone may have something to say, but Councillor Robson. Yeah.
A quick follow-up. I have to Councillor Granger's question. I've just been on the City of Chicago website, and they talk about this tree planting program and the benefits, and air quality, emissions, smog, greenhouse gases, urban heat island effects, noise abatement, psychological well-being, aesthetics, property values, wildlife habitat, stormwater attenuation. No mention of crime. I noticed we're citing information from 2005. I noticed Chicago's crime statistics aren't great. Yeah, I think we need a bit more on this to actually try and build anything on top of it. So I'd support Councillor Granger's request for something we could look at.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. I'll move that the presentation be received. Somebody second. Okay, and just speaking to that, please keep us in touch with how your project is going. Thank you. And I'll put, speak to it.
Yeah, I would. I'm such a fan of trees, as you know. And I'd be surprised if our rate of tree per populations isn't 1-to-1 in the city, with 38,000 street trees, one outside every dwelling. And most people plant at least 2 in their backyards, I would think. I'd be surprised if we didn't come out with that kind of ratio, which ought to make us one of the lowest crime areas in the country, if not the world, I think. So it will be interesting to see it studied further and looked at.
So I'll put the receipt of that. All in favour say aye. Against, so that's carried. Thank you, Jeff. Cheers. I guess you're staying for the next item anyway. But yeah. Okay, and now we're on to the rest of the business. DC 253, O'Manawa Falls Reserve Peer Review. Welcome, Kristen. And are you jointly presenting this? Is that how? Or yeah, whatever. Okay. Thank you. And we'll hear the presentation, and we'll save questions to the end. Thank you.
Morena Greg and elected members, Marty and team, thanks for hearing us along today. I'd also like to welcome some of our special guests who have been involved with us in this report that you're going to see today. In Tourism Bay of Plenty's new role as destination managers, we have 3 components, and that is leadership, advocacy and coordination. And another key part is to consider the interests and viewpoints of iwi and hapu residents, industry and visitors, of course. So this project has been a really good example of destination management in action. In this project, we have been the coordinators of a peer review group who you all met back in April and has been led by Jeff. And this project has considered all of the viewpoints of the stakeholders that I mentioned just before, but also a really important taonga in our area from not just an economic perspective, but also an environmental one, a social one, and also a cultural one. And so that is the report that Jeff is going to take us through today, has taken a very balanced viewpoint of the stakeholder viewpoints and also those components of a balanced approach to the management of this wonderful site.
Thank you, Kristen. So you've got the report, and what I've done with Kristen is just picked out the high points for you and a quick presentation to draw those out. The peer review team is from the New Zealand Parks Agencies Managers Group, of which I'm the convener, but for this panel acted as the independent chair as well. Our review team was international. We had at least 2 chief executives from specialist agencies, and then we had 2 New Zealanders from senior levels from local authorities, and The reason they're in that group is that they also deal with waterfalls and waterfall tourist attractions. The peer review panel worked over a series of days. They worked as volunteers, giving their time to work with a project out of their own area to enrich themselves and to share and give back. There was a series of interviews which we conducted with key groups and elected members. As Kristen said, you remember our session. And what we're basically delivering to you is a report of findings and some options that the panel believes you should take a look at. We believe there's a solution in there and a project in there for everyone. It's recommended there's a staged approach to resolve the issues raised and to accommodate a range of initiatives. So it's not about picking one thing. It's a range of initiatives and a bit of a tiered and phased approach. The staged approach, inclusive of all parties wishing to be involved, probably carries the highest likelihood of success, and it is the best option to ready this location for summer, which is critical. Fundamentally, converting the site entry and then the experience overall to a managed, paid entry for visitors is the most compelling option. The site needs to be managed as an attraction with site presence to ensure cultural values are respected and the entry to many areas is prohibited. It is a higher level of service. It is an intervention, and it's one that with partners carries the highest likelihood of success. Further, it's recommended that what should be pursued immediately is to offer a guided cultural entry experience with an overlook view only. And that experience incrementally increases over time. So the proposition as a destination increases and gets better. It's interesting when we put this to the panel, one of the many examples they came up with was the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Once upon a time, usually on Friday nights, people would take it upon themselves to try and walk across the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but not using the road, which led to a number of arrests, deaths, and it was a very bad space. The correction of that was to, in fact, introduce a guided, cabled walk experience that you paid handsomely for, and that just changed out that behaviour straight away. The peer review panel recommends that for this summer, and to act now, is to provide site induction services and guided stories with tangata whenua, assisted with the local residents' help via the TCC crowd car park at the road frontage and at site building already there. Fundamentally, the panel found that TCC needs to see their involvement not just restricted to the assets or the car park, but to introduce project governance and structure that continues in the longer term. This way you'll bring all your partners with you. You'll only achieve the best things through relationships on this project. It's recommended that Tourism Bay of Plenty, as your RTO, act for TCC and assist the site partners already involved to fully cover the excellent input gathered during this process. Those conversations have started. What was really clear to the panel was that all parties share the same awareness and care and manaki and the urgency to resolve the matters of safety and respect for the awa. The water is sacred. People shouldn't be entering it. The extent of commonality between all the parties probably would surprise all the parties if they were together. And if they came together, I think those relationships and the criticality of success will blossom from that point. And we had numerous examples elsewhere that would, in effect, coach, support and mentor those immediate solutions and those that should be attempted. Relationships. There's a project in here for everyone, and actually there's quite a high level of readiness amongst the parties that would naturally have to speak with each other. The immediate residents' representatives have asked if it is possible to be involved in any future discussions with Ngāti Hangaro. Ngāti Hangaro have showed very strong leadership in this space, and we've really enjoyed the sort of initiative that's been shown and the commitment to resolving things. I think this puts TCC in a very good position. So changing the nature of the visit from prohibited stay away to some form of paid access in return for this basic experience to start with, an understanding of the site values, all these are important things to substantiate the transition to a full tourism proposition, whatever that might be. Tangata Whenua would like to take a lead role in the future, and TCC should have regard for this and a range of considerations, including alternative ownership of the land. The panel found that despite the trust proposal for gondola not possible to be installed for this summer, the quality and promoted benefits of this initiative warrants this to be treated as an ongoing project. All partners need to be formally structured, however, to progress this project's work, together with Tangata Whenua, our treaty partner, and the operational business case work. There's work to do, and no one agency can do it on their own, least of not TCC. It's a joined-up approach, and it's phased. The initial managed access, as recommended, is seen as supportive, but not competing to the trust proposal. A collaborative approach is recommended to grow the Amanama Falls location into a multi-tiered tourism attraction that will evolve and grow as it builds on its successes. The panel came up with 6 top points, and I won't read these out, but they're in your report. But there is a sense of urgency. There is a commitment for leadership, and what leadership looks like is around structure, working with all partners, and resolving things, conversations that need to happen, and some adult ones at that. The integration and the integrated evaluation of proposals for short, medium, and long-term terms is critical, and you'll work out the rest from there. The funding, the resourcing needs, the who does what, and so forth will flow from that. This is a cultural site, and Hapu partnership is critical to the overall success. And there's some big things to come across, big things to talk about around land tenure, the transfer of land discussion, and to investigate fully the kaitiaki role and or the rahui over the water to assist the managed access. The immediacy is upon us. Yes, it's the middle of winter, but in 2 weeks' time it's spring, and we'll be back into another season. We believe, the panel felt, that there were things in place that could be implemented now. The staff in a project management sense have progressed the car park in the meantime over winter really well, and that's going to be well poised. We've briefed the Western Bay Mayor, we've briefed the partners involved, and there's a lot of readiness to take this forward now. And then there's a range of things to cover, probably what keeps you up at night, and that's the safety side of things, the things that we're really worried will happen again if we don't institute some proper change. But it's a space where all the key stakeholders need to be involved and informed, and it's about inclusivity and on-the-ground management as well. The fundamental for us right now as a community is probably around the completeness of the Ngāti Hangaro advisory and conversations around that future and their involvement. Thank you, that's the quick version.
Questions for Jeff, Councillor Granger and Stewart?
Thank you again, Jeff. Just one question in regards to the summary, and that was at the very beginning, a stage approach, etc., and then you continued to say the best option to ready the location for this summer. Now, I want a little bit more clarity on that, because between now and summer is not too long. What is, in your eyes, your intentions there? And what worries me is, have we got enough time to make something safe enough?
Through the chair, the panel sensed the urgency, but also it was their reflection that it is a broken scenario. This is something that needs to be fixed. It was also their view, and in particular with the 2 council officers that had waterfalls in their own agencies, that there was enough time to institute a change out with some level of paid entry, a sort of a cable experience where once you pay something, Tangata Whenua will walk you onto the site for some simple messages around the values of the site, a cultural experience, and you get to an overlook, you look down to the falls, and you get something for your experience. But you don't get to go down to the bottom. But something, anything to change what's probably going to blossom and just increase in number, which is folks just going down and risking their lives for a perceived safe swimming experience, which it is not.
Thank you, Jeff. Can you remind us what your brief was for doing this?
So the panel was invited on a brief to take a look at what some possible ways forward could be for this site. Its brief wasn't to just look at one initiative, so i.e. not to look at solely a gondola or solely a staircase or solely a prohibition. The reason we got so many experts from around the country, one from Australia, was that this isn't actually uncommon. Around the world there's a range of sites that are beautiful, but they're dangerous to get to. And our brief was to sort of reflect some best practice and suggest some ways forward and some options.
So in your consideration, my concern is that without paying, people should have some sort of access to it, not necessarily full access, but public use. Can you just comment on your consideration of that aspect?
Yes, the panel was reflecting through a tourism lens that New Zealand's a little bit different, it seems, that we have a real everything has to be free type mentality, and they felt that the right intervention based on their experience was to introduce a level of charge to weed out the sort of people we don't want going there. And it's quite a bold thing to do. New Zealanders in particular believe that free access is just how it works. And a lot of folk that come here are astounded to see that a lot of things aren't charged for.
So did you consider tour operators applying, putting in a tender for concessions to access it?
So sorry, our brief wasn't to get into a bit of a procurement plan or to... There's a range of steps suggested in the report for the way forward, and that's going to be collaborative. There isn't actually a brief for this yet, so you'll need to work one up.
Lastly, can you just clarify Project Leo, where that fits in? It's referred to on page 41. Project Leo proposal, is that the gondola proposal?
Yes, sorry, there's a few bit of terminology there, and that's probably the author's issue. So the interchangeability, there's the Hidden Valley Gorge Trust and Project Leo and gondola, mostly meaning the same environmental project to introduce a gondola proposal to a discussion amongst all of this. Yep.
Thank you, Jeff and Kristen. Now, the idea of someone paying for an experience, I like that. How, though, do you physically stop people going down to the waterfall base rather than just sticking to that experience?
It's something the panel talked about a lot. Having a site presence with a paid entry, I think, will deal with most reasonable people. I think the issue will be that if we can join up some of the relationships around how that works, we've had some really strong local residents support. I think there's a lot of partners that need to be part of changing the behaviour and making a campaign of a kind, get through on social media that things aren't the same anymore. And we've had a number of thoughts around how that might roll out as a suggestion, but it's not uncommon. So changing out the behaviour is a mixture of campaign, site presence, attracting people who get something for their visit in return for an admission fee, and that you can't swim there, so there's nothing to go for.
Thanks, Jeff, for your presentation, and also thank you to you and other panel for giving your time for free for the benefit of this. Really appreciate it. I guess it's just really a continuation of the other speakers. It seems to me that the fundamental nature of the benefit for the tourist is changed, whereas before they would go down, or the visitor or tourist would go down to swim, and it was an interactive experience. Now it's a passive looking, the potential passive looking experience. A fundamental change in the benefit for or the value gained from the person. How would you see that? Do you think that would, how would you respond to that as a bit of a concern, I guess?
It's a really good question, Max. Through the chair, the panel talked about this a lot, but we were assisted by the residents' knowledge of other waterfalls. And it's a curious, maybe, story in waiting that the Western Bay of Plenty has a lot of waterfalls, and a lot of people use rivers for swimming, and waterfalls is a place to go. And we've got 10 good ones. Only 2 or 3 are actually used much. And there's a really good piece of work in the background which has been researched by residents that maybe shows there's another brand or destination package in mind. Not everyone goes to the coast. So if people are seeking out this kind of thing, we think we could probably offer waterfalls elsewhere, or a waterfall trail, or places where you can swim and places where you don't.
No. Thank you. I guess my question revolves a lot around money, as in who's going to pay to get this first staged approach in, who's going to receive the entry fee, how do we establish the entry fee versus the value in actually not getting in the water but just hearing some of the history. How do you set a value? What is that worth to someone? What are they prepared to pay? Do Te Tangata Whenua want to be paid for their role in doing the cultural introduction? So I guess it's all around money, and do we need to know more before we go to that next step?
Through the chair, of course. What this peer review doesn't do is the natural next stage of setting up a project structure that then would oblige a level of business case that would go there. And for that to work, there needs to be some collaboration. We've yet to have a full discussion with Ngāti Hangaro. We've yet to get into a next level of discussion with the residents, and the staff are doing great work on the ground in terms of some basic infrastructure. But you've identified the next steps really well.
Thanks, Jeff and Kristen. On page 11, when in your consultation with Western Bay of Plenty, I'm very surprised to note that they're prepared to amend road bylaw to prohibit car parking, because we've not ever heard that, I don't think, before. In fact, we've heard that it couldn't be done. It's, you can't restrict. I've counted 80 cars there. My sister lives up the road, and I've been through there in the summer when there's been 80 cars down that side. So was that recently that they just said that? Did they acknowledge that's a new change? And how much have we investigated whether that's even possible on their part?
Yes, so I've specifically had a meeting with Deputy Chief Executive of Western Bay. The challenge isn't so much the bylaw in their words, it's the enforcing. So I think there's an operator or a staff decision around how the bylaw would be managed. I think the intervention around a paid car park or car parking off the road would help, but there's some work to do there. Yeah.
Well, I think I'd be first to put in a tender for a clamping business if it was backed by a council bylaw, because it's very doable if you want to enforce it. You don't need to tow them away, you just clamp them, and people having to pay will discourage parking there very fast, I would think. So it is something we should investigate further, I think, if there's a willingness.
My turn now. I'm going around showing I'm fair. Look, it seems to be like project expansion to me. When this first came up, was mooted, it was a group using their money to try and persuade council that this might be a good idea, and it was going to be done in conjunction with Tangata Whenua, and that probably some use of council land would be required, and now it's ended up potentially where council takes a lead. Do you really think that councils are good at taking a lead and getting something like this across the line? I mean, it was to try and establish a paid an attraction that would actually make money for the area, and be something where tourists, foreign tourists mainly, not locals, we're actually giving some money back. Can you really see this happening if we get involved?
Actually, the panel thought this might have been an exit strategy from TCC. Yeah, that you'd done some heavy lifting on acquiring new land to provide for a car park, that you'd indicated that you wanted some experts to look at how this might transcend council's involvement. So actually, the investment side of it, nowhere does it say that TCC is paying for everything. In fact, it's those other partners that see themselves having probably more of a role than is appreciated, I'd suggest.
Good, I'm glad I asked
yeah.
the question.
Yeah.
I was under the impression from this that it was us doing the next steps and us arranging the cultural tours but as it isn't, no, that changes
Yeah,
things.
there's some
Thank
carefully
you.
worded prompts there, because why do you have to own the land? So, etc. Those options will come up by virtue of working with partners.
Maybe seeking, for example, if there was, obviously, if money is to be, taken off particular foreign tourists, that we would use that money to help fund tourism BOP and promote tourism in the area. I mean, it's not viewed as some thing just for the sake of it. I'm looking at ways that we can actually improve our tourism from it. But we can't, if we're so heavily involved that in fact it costs us money and doesn't go anywhere, well, that's my biggest worry. But I'm pleased you mentioned that we're not expected to do the funding. So, Councillor Malloy, and I'll carry on round. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. And also thanks for your presentation on the Bay of Plenty National Park. It's very interesting. I'm looking forward to that rolling out. with Omanawa Falls, I'm a bit concerned that reading that report, it doesn't seem to have given, possibly the way I've read it, due weight to the Project Leo, because I know that has been sort of basically a community-driven. Warren Dawson, I think, was one of the first people that really started that, and his property boundaries to the property of the gorge, I believe, or very close to it. And then other locals, and it's grown from there. So to some extent, it has been locally driven. I'm aware that they've done a huge amount of work. They've been very professional in how they've gone about it, to my understanding. They've got themselves to a point where, this is an exciting project. Also, it will be launched from, I understand, Belk Road, the gondola, rather than Manawa Road, which is a significant benefit to everybody concerned. So I'm just a bit worried, and also part of their project is the protection of the hidden gorge. They've got a big program around that, which is a vital part of it, not just the falls, but the land up to the falls and beyond. So they've been incredibly professional, and they've got this project to a point where it's virtually ready to be launched. So I didn't sort of get the feel reading that had been weighted properly. You might like to respond.
Through the chair, the peer review panel wasn't a feasibility study or a review of the Leo project. It was a review of all the options that are before council and how they might roll out, and how we change the things that we don't want to happen anymore there. The Leo interview, that was quite clear that they were worried that we would try and speak on behalf of them, and it's their IP. So it's for Leo to take governors through what they'd like to do, and you're right, they've got some other ways that they can enter the gorge, and there's other land that may provide their access. What the panel was looking to say in the review report was that these things might just work really well together, though. Changing out the behaviour of people we don't want in a Waihi Tapu area is probably a first priority, and a number of those things support a Leo outcome in any event. So we had some great dialogue with Leo, and we're also very careful that we're not trying to speak for some of the things that they want to convey. There's a number of things that they're doing, and they haven't even started a resource consent process yet. So there's things that they'll want to talk to you about. They have been talking to Doc a great deal, and that's been really encouraging to hear how that's gone. So we'll hear from them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Robson and Morris.
Yeah, there is a question at the end of what I'm about to say, Jeff, just to avoid being stopped mid-speak. I'm minded of the Mayor's observation about expansion, and I'm more concerned that what we have here is conflation. When the admin building fell over, just over here, there were two possible approaches. One was to see it as a chance to completely transform the city of Tauranga in 3 weeks for $1. It didn't quite work out. And the other was to actually replace the admin building with something that was required. In this situation, we have a situation where there was a safety issue, and then there was the Project Leo thing, which is a much bigger, wider issue. My feeling is, and I'm not quite as effusive about the Project Leo thing, having had some conversations personally around how wonderful it is and the motivations behind some of it. Money seems to be part of that, which worries me a little.
Excuse me, point of order.
So
I am going to interrupt him.
What's the interruption?
Well, I would like to hear a question. This is question
yeah,
time. This is not debating time. This is question time.
Coming to the question, I believe. Yeah.
And thank you, Councillor Baldock, for reminding me, but I hadn't forgotten that there is a question. The point I'm getting at is that there are a number of significant policy and strategy issues here, and I suppose what I see in the paper that's presented towards me is a really superficial evaluation of those. And I suppose my question is, if we were able to find the funding, could you go to the next level, the sort of level that would inform these discussions, the sort of level I'd expect, if you like, from the new Tourism Bay of Plenty. Because I think there's another level. This paper produces a set of questions, but it doesn't provide some key answers. I mean, and as an obvious example, you talked about this waterfall could be seen as part of a network of waterfalls. What is that network? What are these options? What are the overall implications of this? What is the strategic framework in which we're operating? What are the motivations of some of the actors? There's another level. So what I hear you saying is that there is, you know, this is something that potentially has legs in some way, shape or form. Take a tiny step. But what I'm suggesting is that there's another level before we actually start taking steps, which is a deeper level of investigation, which we, instead of asking you to volunteer to do, we actually pay you to do. Now, are you up for that? Do you think that's required?
Through the chair, one of the points the report makes too, in support of that, is there isn't a lot of data to work with. So the position you'd want to be in is a greater level of data confidence around what the best next step or the best venture might be, but everybody wants that. What's suggested is a phased approach of creating some change, building up some data from actual people who are taking a cultural walk on a cable for a view, and using the language of a trial, so that for this summer you've made a conspicuous and conscious change to work with partners, because the panel also reflected that no one partner amongst this has the solution or is at the point with data to make a business plan recommendation. So you need to do some more work first.
I suppose supplementary, Your Worship, is who should take the lead on that? Because to me, and this is a question through you, Your Worship, to Kristen Dunn, it seems to me that Tourism Bay of Plenty should take the lead in that next level, impartial, professional evaluation. You've been given a piece of paper's been opened, but we need someone to actually look at that in a wider context. That's got to be a funded piece of work. It will require resource, it will require time, it will require access to data and evaluation of the data. It's not something we want, well, I think it's fair to ask volunteers to do. So who would take the lead on these next incremental steps, their evaluation, contextualizing it, strategic overview? Who's going to do that? And that's through you to Kristen Dunn or whoever wants to pick up the... Thank you.
Through the chair, thanks John. And these are discussions that we're having at the moment with Marty and the team as to what role we can best take to help to facilitate, coordinate, advocate, lead a solution. And I guess what I will say about this process is we have been able to form great relationships, and those positive relationships should continue going forward. And we are probably seen as a Switzerland or a neutral point for those viewpoints to be shared in a constructive way. So I do think we have a role there to continue that within a framework such as the panel has suggested. But they are things that we need to agree with Marty.
Thank you.
Just further that, Kristen, you've actually got on board now someone to look at paid attractions, I think, or to develop them, and you've also iwi tourism. So maybe it's something that they would have quite a bit to be able to contribute on that. So would that be right?
Absolutely.
A couple more questions, we'll have our break. Councillor Kurak.
So in terms of paid attractions, I can understand a high level of service with high operating costs that it charges more than appropriate. But when we talk about a lower level of service, and that's simply access to a viewing platform, and you spoke of the advantage of a charge is that it would weed out the people that you don't want. And I'm thinking of the younger people, perhaps backpackers, who might want to be tempted to jump into the water. Just confirm that, just who you're talking about there. But in terms of, of that low level of service, particularly to locals, wouldn't a charge perhaps be a little harsh in terms of that? Just your thinking on that, because it's something that a lot of people expect for free.
Thanks, Rick. Through the chair. one important thing to bear in mind is we are trying to change the face of the visitors that come to the region. So we're looking for cultural explorers, people who really want to understand the story and the history of this place, who will respect the tapu nature of the water, who want to hear from local hapu about their history as well as the Western history, and there's an extensive history there as well. We also want eco-travellers who again want to respect these sort of places and see them as wonders of the world that need to be protected. So we're not looking for the Instagrammers who want to take a selfie and Instagram it around the world. We're not looking for, who's the UK crowd who put instructions on, Lad Bible, to be the visitors. So these sort of interventions actually work very quickly to change the face of who is coming, and therefore they are prepared to pay for the experience because they do see it as a wonderment, as opposed to just something to tick off their bucket list in Instagram. So I think that's really important to reflect. And we haven't had lengthy discussions yet with hapu, and certainly the invitation is there for us all to attend a hapu-led discussion on marae about what they would like to achieve in this area. And residents have a viewpoint too. And I think actually the combination of that would be a wonderful experience, and I certainly would be happy to pay for it. As for residents, there does need to be a consideration for them, but this all comes as part of the business planning that Leanne was talking about and the extra level of detail that John has been raising.
Councillor Mason and Brown, and then
Just a health and safety thing, and I guess which is one of the reasons why we're here, is the issues around the terrible injuries and fatality that has occurred. On page 9, I found that list of all of the accidents that have happened very compelling, and just wondered whether you would recommend us actually proactively putting that list and others on the social media platforms that you mentioned, and having a proactive communications campaign to try and reduce the people being tempted by this, and also changing the nature of the visitors and the experience itself, as you say.
Yes, through the chair, the report talks about the nature of a trial, and I think alongside that trial of a conspicuous change and attracting a different visitor is a social media campaign that says it's different now, but you get something when you go. And I think we take it from there. We can't have another summer like the previous ones. There's just been too many helicopter rescues, and we've had a fatality and so on. And I think great things will come from that. The panel did fall back on a number of examples where folk felt that could never change. But by using a campaign that appeals to the fair and reasonable side of the public to say we can't go on like this, and that it's a broken site and something needs to be done. I don't think the council needs to completely be the one that does everything in that respect, but there is a need to sort of act.
Councillor Baldock.
I think.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Apologies. What must happen for this to be open as a paid attraction for the summer? What needs to happen? Because it's not really quite clear in my mind. What must happen for it to be open as a paid attraction this summer? And have we collectively got the time, the money and the resources to do that?
Through the chair, that's an excellent question, because what needs to happen very soon is a conversation with Tangata Whenua, with Ngāti Hangaro, a hapu-led discussion at the marae around what it is we're really trying to do, around a vision and values discussion that gets to the nub of the story of that site and how we best work together to curate the very special nature of that site, and a number of good things. All good things will come from that. The rest of it, there's a number of advantages right now in that if it was your own money, you'd just finish what you've already started with that car park and keep it as a fairly simple car park, but there's a fence and a paid gate entry. That we do work with the local very immediate residents around a reference group, because unlike a number of projects, we don't have petitions from them. We have willing people who want to help and be part of the solution. We should let them. And then we've got some simple ideas to engage with Tangata Whenua on, around where maybe a very straightforward guided walk down to a place where you can get the view as a very first trial stage this summer project. And it's a working thing right now, that's it. But for the sake of some people, assisting some capacity work within the hapu around resource, employment and so some cable, some riggers to sort of make the cable safe, things like that. Those are things that we can do, and then they're not really expensive. But we have to start at the beginning with that conversation.
Yeah, my question is to you, Mr. Chairman, just that after the break, like, I appreciate the report, but I'm wanting to have a time to talk to our staff, a question to the Chief Executive on this. How do we do something by this summer that will avoid, as Jeff has said, what happened last year? So if that's where we're heading, that's great. That's what I'd like to know. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll adjourn till 10:02 for a break and start at 10:02 sharp. So we're resuming the meeting. Before we get into questions of staff, sort of occurs to me that I'm just wondering if this the proposed resolution is a little bit detailed at the moment in some ways, and that if we shouldn't just ask staff to work with Tourism BOP and all the parties to bring together some sort of a meeting to facilitate what might happen in the future, because I think there's a lot of stuff to get yet. We're not, from my point of view, we're not there. But I'll now listen to other points of view and consider a resolution. Look, Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I think that's the simplifying of that would be good, but the crisis that's facing us, I think, is this summer coming very fast, as has been said, spring next week. So I don't want us to pass a resolution that carries on looking at the bigger picture thing, the tourism offer, without focusing in now on the fact that we're going to have the same situation as we had last summer unless we take action. And I think that's more us taking action, definitely in cooperation with Ngāti Hangarau and so on, but to try and address that, I think, is crucial. I don't share Jeff's optimism about what he termed reasonable, what did you say, Jeff? Deal with most reasonable people. These are teenagers whose brains haven't yet developed fully, and we know they cannot see risk as they should, and they are climbing over these fences and doing incredibly stupid things, and that's what we've got to focus on for this short term, I think.
There are two aspects to it. There's a short-term, perhaps preventative fix. I don't think anything will ever totally remove all risk. And then there's the longer-term issue of what happens to the falls and any proposals for it. Councillor Kurak?
Just on that safety matter, could we have Mark Smith update us on that aspect, please?
What aspect in particular, Councillor?
Any sort of recent updates in terms of the safety issue, that all bit. Pardon? Yeah, physical stuff, and what thinking has been in place in terms of addressing the safety matter before this next summer?
Well, I think in the body of the report, essentially it's suggesting that the three parties or the interested parties come together, at which time we, I think, collectively would decide on an appropriate short-term response to ensure public safety over the summer period. We believe that we can achieve that through this process. Once we've done that, essentially, it would allow for, and we could, I believe, achieve that without compromising the aspirations of any particular party involved. It would be a focus for all of us, after which we would then look at longer term opportunities in conjunction with all of parties. We believe that whilst Council may take a lead initially, it may be that we engage and work and support Tourism Bay of Plenty to facilitate that process. And I think the priority would be for all of those parties to achieve safety factors for this coming summer. And I think there's commitment by the parties to achieve that.
Thank you, Mayor Greg. I do notice that in paragraph 11, it says there are no financial considerations to this paper. So I find that difficult to actually believe, because there will surely be some impost on us as council, but I certainly agree with the concept of getting together and with that meeting and thrashing it out, a plan going forward.
Look, well, the only comment I do want to make here, in my eyes, as regards to introducing services ready for this summer, I think we should be introducing more security, I feel, to make sure that these youngsters don't go where they shouldn't go.
Following on from the Chief Executive's comments, then, I'm just wanting to ask Kristen, really, because I'm not sure we want to put Tourism Bay of Plenty in the role of solving that problem up there. Definitely in the role coordinating and stuff and working on what probably can't happen until next year in terms of a paid experience and so on, which is a step in the right direction. But in the immediacy, I just, part of it, but not taking it on away from us, because I think that's probably our role. Could you comment, and the Chief Executive maybe?
Thanks, Larry, through the chair. I think that's the conversation that Marty and I have had, that we do need to help coordinate this in the short term. You do actually have funding already allocated toward this project from a CapEx perspective. The government funding is unknown at this point as to what we may or may not be able to do with that. And then there is a role to look at the proposition as John and Leanne described in good detail, and that potentially is where we take more of a leadership role following a coordination role.
And I think if we take a collective partnership approach to this, it would be a lot better than, I think, the traditional approach for council providing protection and security for public, which historically resembles hurricane wire fences and security guards 24/7. I think there's another way of achieving this for the interests of all parties and the community.
Can we just, this is now Mark's back, but maybe the Chief Executive, the $1 million from the government was for the formation of the car park, and I heard comments about it's being progressed. I thought it had stopped. Is that still?
It wasn't actually for a car park, it was for a spiral staircase feature which would provide access down to the water, which really is contrary to the Waitapu and cultural aspects. We are hoping to have a meeting with DIA, who are the manager of those funds, within the next week or so to see whether or not they can buy into this concept longer term to try and develop a longer term project. I think I agree the short term initiatives that need to be taken largely will be driven and supported by council, but we believe that there's a community partnership approach, and it would be our hope that both Project Leo and Ngāti Hangaro can support those short-term initiatives.
May I have one more then? Just with Western Bay's offer with a parking bylaw, obviously that's a lengthy process to change a bylaw, so we probably don't see that getting in place before Christmas as one of the measures possibly that could be.
It's unlikely that we'd be able to pass a parking bylaw through in the intervening period. That doesn't, I think, prevent us encouraging and providing public car parking off the road, which essentially is what we'd attempt to do. Well, we believe we could achieve that.
Councillor Robson.
Yeah, I think the conversation that I'm hearing, and I seem to be under reasonably relaxed standing orders, and I appreciate that from the chair, is it goes back to the point I made about conflation. There are two issues here, and we need to carefully separate them. I don't believe Tourism Bay of Plenty want to act as responsible owners of the property in terms of public safety. I don't believe they've ever volunteered for that or suggested they want that role. But there is this bigger, opportunity within a carefully constructed strategic framework to maybe turn this into something wonderful. There is a short-term requirement to try and make sure that we, act as responsible owners here and make the environment within whatever reasonable limits as safe as possible for people for the next 6 months or whatever that period. I suppose what I'm looking for is from the chair. He indicated that he was looking to change the recommended motions, and I'm wondering if we can get something drafted up so we've actually got something to speak to. I think the broad consensus seems to be around seeing those two as separate items, but I'm looking for a motion in front of me to talk to.
I had jotted something down which I will read out, but part of it won't meet your satisfaction in terms of it does link TBOP in with with addressing the safety concerns as well, because they may have some. So my idea was A, that council receives a peer review, B, works with TBOP and all parties to address safety concerns in the short term, and the use of the area as a tourist attraction in the long term. So, but both of those involve TBOP. You may prefer that we separate it out, that council itself looks after the safety concerns and TBOP assists us with the examining the use of the area as a tourist attraction in the long term. Right. Yes, Councillor, sorry.
Look, I think everyone appreciates we have short-term personal risk issues, and my sense is if we can use that as a catalyst to bring the parties together and nut that one out quickly, that provides a really good platform to look at a longer-term aspirations for the future of the site in a much larger scale. And I believe there's a will by the parties who have been well invested in this process to try and achieve those short-term safety outcomes. So,
question is, how do we encapsulate that in a motion that we can see on the screen in front of us, so we've got something to debate and possibly amend?
I'll just get some assistance with that shortly. Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I think the actual recommended resolutions do enable that, I think. The message is clear. And C, I wouldn't want to see C drop, because we are still working with, Project Leo out there as part of it all, and we don't want to sort of drop that today. We need to still see that as a future thing that needs to be continually worked on. They're needing to see a signal from us about, just the general direction. So I'd still support A, B and C, given we've made very clear messages about the short term to the Chief Executive.
For me, the paid attraction thing would require further consideration. A lot of consideration actually, because I'm very strong on free access for locals to reserves. So that I couldn't support B on that basis. And I'd also want to know in C that we were an enabler, but I would probably prefer to leave it at that, because I'm not sure that we should be a project governance team and a structure for longer term options. It's totally different to what we initially entered this process in. So yeah. I was going to replace B, and I was going to say that, but I'll just check with the CEO because he's got some ideas here.
To address, we should say interest parties to address the short-term safety issues for this coming summer. And then,
do you want a few minutes to write this down? We'll adjourn for 5 minutes and try and get something that covers, because I think we need to address the safety, and we need to keep the other parties interested in obviously some sort of an attraction there. All parties, iwi and the various other groups.
To the chair,
yeah.
If I may, if you just took out the words paid visitor and put a managed experience, and then that takes out the paid.
Just.
I'm not sure how easy that's going to be either. So this is
before we move into the adjournment, Your Worship. I just note that we need to be careful in our choice of words. One meaning of enabler is a person who encourages or enables negative or self-destructive behaviour in another. I think we need to choose our words carefully.
Okay, so we'll just have a 5 much so they wish. So I'll just read what receives the report. DC 253 O'Manawa Falls peer review and supports the recommended staged approach, working with all parties to safely manage the site entry and visitor experience in the short term. And then so the next bit is the longer term approach, and that is in association with Tourism Bay of Plenty and all interested parties, facilitates the development of a project governance structure for longer term options. So it doesn't mean that we are the governance structure. It doesn't mean that we're not, but that leaves it open for discussion, and hopefully we achieve a fair result. So I'm prepared to move that if I have a seconder. Okay, so that's seconded. So in speaking to that, I think that's a sensible way through. I've got various concerns, such as I do want to keep some sort of free local access for ratepayers, but of course it's got to be safe. I fully support the idea of having a paid tourist attraction for visitors, and eventually in the long term that would be absolutely fantastic. I am concerned about project expansion, and initially this was all came to us from another party wanting to do this, and we do seem to be getting ourselves involved more and more in it. So when it comes to C, I'll be looking for us to have as little involvement in the governance structure as possible, because otherwise I simply think the thing will bog down, and what will happen will be nothing will happen. So yeah, that's speaking to it. Seconder.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a sensible approach. We're separating out the short term from the long term, and clearly we have also taken out the fact that it's necessarily a paid experience, because I think there is some concern that a walk to a viewing platform and then looking at the falls may not attract a high admission rate for that. So, and then I also think it encourages the ongoing discussion with Project Leo as far as a longer term and much more substantial tourism offering. So happy to support it.
Yeah, absolutely endorse the approach. Good way that we work through this. The short term and handling the health and safety is paramount importance right now. So that's good. Thank you to the panel for their contribution, which has added a lot of value. I did like the comment about this that Jeff made, potentially being an exit from the council ownership. I see that as being potentially very attractive. Why are we in this business? So historical reasons, obviously, but there's nothing like giving highly motivated small group of people to make something happen, and with a collaborative approach. So note that Project Leo has been in a lot of conversation with Department of Conservation, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and a lot of other parties as well. So they've got the credibility, they've got some good people behind them, together with Tourism Bay of Plenty and Ngāti Hanaro, and with the initial guidance of the council, could end up being a fantastic opportunity for the tourism industry.
Thank you. We need to make it very clear that this is not a no, it's not a stop. It's I think all of us agreeing that we absolutely need to address the safety at the site and try and deter people from going there. That's going to take a good communication plan, which will be critical to this as well. We need to get the message there that it's not open to the public, and I think we need to just take a pause and make sure, and I always go by the saying, do it once, do it well. And I also note that Tourism Bay of Plenty have got the right staff on board to manage this project, to support the project, and to steer it in the right direction through the experience manager and the Maori Tourism Development role. I'm not sure exactly what his title is, but yeah, I think they've got the good resources in place. Let's use that experience, do it once and do it well.
Happy to support. I'd just like to comment that whatever the aspirations are of the various parties, we just need to make sure that we leave the opportunity open that the best possible thing happens there, because there's huge potential there, and I'd like to see it carry out. Thank you.
Councillor Morris and then Councillor Stewart.
I was and remain a minority here. I was a supporter of the original proposal to have free public access down to the water, and so by voting for this, it would somewhat be inconsistent with that approach. I do believe that the longer this jewel is considered hidden, the greater the incentive of people who like to take forbidden fruit will be. It's a hidden treasure, and the longer it remains that way, the more people will want to go down there. And I do support free public access on public land to the water. In terms of Wahitapu, it's sensitive, it's something that needs to be worked through with mana whenua, although I do note that in terms of the former museum proposal, that was proposed to be on top of Wahitapu land, which was then going to have the Wahitapu uplifted through cultural processes. So there's a wide range of considerations to be held in the future, but again, I think that if we had have gone with the original proposal, perhaps not this summer, but next summer, there would have been free, unfettered public access down there, and people would be swimming and enjoying it. And I do note with some regret the comments that have been made about those pesky young people. You know, come on guys, let's get a life.
Speaks the youngest councillor. Councillor Stewart.
I'm not 100% happy with the words up there. A recommended staged approach, so that gives the connotation that we've already decided what approach are we doing. I'd like to have it more open at this stage. I would like the safety and public use of the area as paramount considerations. And if there's any other interested parties out there, I'd like to hear from them as well at this stage. The recommended stage approach just sounds a bit driven to a certain outcome, so I probably won't support it. I'll just wait and hear what other elected members have to say.
Move an amendment or a request to the mover and seconder. Would they be happy to remove recommended and just put supports a staged approach?
I think the staged approach, all that means to me is that the first thing is to look after the safety. Then later on down the track, you're looking after the, the long-term future. So, but I would be happy to remove that word recommended, because I'll check with my seconder though. So supports a staged approach as opposed to the recommended stage approach.
Oh, but then we have to I think it's important that we recognise the work that's gone in by the panel. So if we're taking out recommended, it's almost sort of, to me, it's a bit of a slap in the face for the panel, personally. In that case, if you want to move it, by the looks of it, I can't get the agreement of the seconder. It would have to be an amendment.
Well, I do move that, because it's a little too prescribed otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, so the amendment is that you would change it to the words supports a staged approach. Is that what you recommend? Okay. Well, I'll second it.
Well, basically, as I just mentioned before, the use of the term recommended refers to the report. And I think there was some concern expressed, e.g. Councillor Stewart, that creates a concern because of that level of prescription.
I'd like to ask a question of Kristen and Kristen. So with this, if we do change it, you were both saying before relationships, and from what I understand, a lot of time has been spent developing that relationship to get to this point. So will this, what would this jeopardise if we actually take out the recommended wording of that? Will it undo the good that's been done so far in terms of relationship with Iwi Hapu, Project Leo, DOC, whoever else has been involved?
Through the chair, I don't think it's a game changer. I think that your intent to, as you say, go through relationships and do this as a collective impact project. You've got key things in there like governance, structure. You've covered the short term. I think whether it's the recommended or otherwise, the other thing the report, of course, mentions is the working with people. I guess we'll find out when we work with them. So I think it'll be okay.
Well, I do not. I think if we don't have the recommended staged approach as outlined in the report, we don't know where the heck we're going. It's just a staged approach. We've been through this process. We've had this panel give us recommendations. There is nothing in the recommendations that locks us into things in the future. It's simply a direction forward, and we should stick with it. Just because one or two councillors have a feeling about being locked into things they're not comfortable with, that's their vote and they may do so. But I certainly do not support taking out the recommended staged approach. It's why we've got to this point, and we should carry on with the focus on the short-term safety issues that we need to do, but then allowing time for the next council to come in and carry on with this through further support or corrections as they wish to.
Through the chairs, through to the mover of this amendment, I just want to share one other word in there. If you take note, the word experience. To me, it might not end up as an experience. For me, I think it would be safer for us to safely manage the site entry for visitors in the short term.
Okay, so no other speakers to the amendment. So I'll put that. All in favour of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Against? Well, it's better have a show of hands, but I think it's lost. Oh, the amendment? Okay. No, wait a minute. This is the amendment. I did it verbally, but I wasn't sure whether... Yeah. So who is voting for the amendment? That's what I'm trying to get. Supports the recommended supports a stage approach, working with all interested parties to safely manage the site entry. Those in favour of that? Okay, are those against? So it's... Okay, I better read the numbers out because there's going to be... so myself, Councillor Kurak and Councillor Granger was in favour of it. Those against, Councillor Baldock, Brown, Mason, Clout, Morris and Malloy, and abstention, Councillor Robson and Stewart. So the amendment fails. So we're back to the substantive motion, and where we're up to in the speakers. Yeah, Councillor Robson.
Before I speak to the motion, just quickly, I would request that it be put in parts. I'm concerned with B in that there's an implicit assumption that we are facilitating a visitor experience at some way, shape or form in there. And I'm not certain that there's a budget in place to provide a safe visitor experience. So I'm nervous about B. I'm comfortable with the report. I think the report's a great starting point. I'm comfortable with C, particularly with Tourism Bay of Plenty identified there, and the development of a proper project governance structure. I think that's critical going forward. I think that there's already too many people involved who are not, if you like, being subject to good governance collectively. But I would like the ability to vote against B, if that's possible, and should B fail, if it's put in parts, I'd be happy to sit and try and draft something if I had the time.
Other speakers? Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, I will support A, B and C. I'm a little concerned about the way it's ended up, but it's still giving enough direction, I think. I support Councillor Mason's comments that we don't want to put a big pause on some really good work that's going on. We're always talking about the need for visitor attraction experiences here, given particularly the number of people coming through the cruise ships. So there's a lot of good work being done, and there have been engagements with DOC, as has been said, and NZ, whoever they are, the NZTE and others. So this enables that to carry on, I hope. In the short term, the recommendations are pretty sensible, pretty clear. I can't see, I know people feel funny about paying for access to council land, but this is quite a unique situation. It's not like it's a reserve. It's not like Coyote Falls, although we often can't go there because the water's too bad. But this is not the same thing, and I can't see how it works really without a paid experience, because if it's simply free entry, I don't know how you gain that control over the numbers that go up there. And also without dealing with the roadside parking, because even if we have a parking, if it's certainly a paid parking area, they're going to opt for the road anyway, and that's another danger area. There's not yet been a massive accident there, but it is very likely the way they park, the way they back out of those parks and so on, with that being a reasonably busy country road. So I think this is the right thing. I think we've given the right message this morning to the Chief Executive that we do need to work hastily to get something sorted before the onslaught of summer. I note Councillor Morris's comments, and he is the closest to his teenage years, but despite my 65 years, I still remember them and the crazy things I did, that I survived by some miraculous fortune, and that we need to do something to help them make better choices, because they are doing crazy things there, and they ought not to be, and it is our land and it is our responsibility to try and improve that.
Right of reply. I think when it comes to talking about the word visitor experience, we do know that people are going there at the moment and they're experiencing it, and it's being promoted. It sounds obvious, doesn't it? And it's being promoted on various sites as a place to go for that visitor experience. So I think, you know, we've got to try and work out if we can possibly safely manage it. So I don't have a big issue with the wording, but should it lose, we'll see what other words can be put in its place. For my, I just want to make it quite clear, because there was discussion about paid access. When this whole project first came up, or the idea of doing something with the Manawa Falls, I was quite happy, because I thought, you know, that is one of the few things that Tauranga lacks, and that's paid visitor attractions. Things that they have in Rotorua, where people who come here, whether they be freedom campers or other tourists, they can actually spend some money and contribute to our local economy instead of just doing things for free. But at the same time, I have a strong feeling that on a reserve land, there's got to be an opportunity for free access, in particular for locals. I would find that a major change if somehow locals could in some way be charged for access to a reserve that are there. So this does not mean I support having this effectively taken over privately, because I don't. I think there should be, where access is available, and safe, it should be free for locals, and that's got to be worked around in the end. If you have some sort of an attraction like a gondola, which is how this all first started, was as a company was going to perhaps do gondolas or some sort of sightseeing there, and I still thought then, well, there's still got to be something for locals, and there does, because it's we share in the ownership of that. That's part of our area. So I just see this as the next step in the process. First of all, to keep it as safe as possible. It's never going to be safe. People are always going to go there, no matter what you put there, no matter what you tell them to do. That's just the way it is, and they've got to take responsibility for their own actions at some stage. And secondly, on a longer term basis, then we look how the idea of other projects, whether it be gondolas or whatever else, can go ahead. So that's why I'm happy to support it all, but I'll take it in parts. So A, all in favour say aye. Against, so that's carried. And B, all in favour of B, raise your hand. So there's myself, Councillor Baldock, Brown, Mason, Kurak, Clout, and Malloy, and against, and that's Councillor Granger, Stewart, and Morris, and abstention from Councillor Robson. So that's carried. Thank you very much. C. Oh, I wasn't going to bother with it. C. All those in favour, raise your hand. Okay, myself, Councillor Baldock, Brown, Mason, Kurak, Clout, and Robson and Stewart and Granger and Malloy, and against Councillor Morris. So that's carried as well. Thanks very much. We've eventually got there. And we have the auditors with us for our next item. DC2. It's Anton, I've got it right, haven't I? And Clarence, I'm not going to try for the surnames. Okay, Paul will introduce this. Thank you, Paul.
Through the Chair, just to introduce this paper. So this is the from Audit New Zealand, the interim report on the 2019 annual report. So this is based on the interim audits that Audit New Zealand have conducted, commencing at around February this year. The final management letter will come to the new incoming council later in the year, as it will be completed after the finalisation of the annual report, which is coming back to council for adoption on the 17th of September. So I'll take the report as read and hand over to Anton and Clarence in terms of any questions that they may have on the report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors, and thanks to be here. So, as Paul said, this is our interim report, or the report on our interim audit. So this is normally when we look at the control environment. So that is what we do at our interim audit. This year we also brought some work forward that we normally do in our final audit. We worked with management to do quite a bit of work on that, and Anton will talk about that. So our interim audit is to assess, as I said, the internal controls, and then if we identify any breakdowns or any deficiencies, we normally report that to council. So in our control environment assessment for this year, we assessed it to be effective. That's from audit perspective. So that meant that we could rely on the controls and do our most efficient audit approach. It also means that the overall attitude, awareness and actions of council is aligned to actually support the controls, which is really good. So as noted in our report, we've identified some areas of control where it can be enhanced, and that is all in the report. There's also in our non-financial reporting that we've made some recommendations about how to add some narratives just to explain some of the measures to the readers of the report. And then we also looked at your your sensitive expenditure transactions, and I'm not going to go into detail with that. Overall, we made some recommendations around how you actually how you comply with your policies. So it's just a matter of making sure that the sign-offs and that sort of thing is in line with your policies. We can say that we didn't identify any items that weren't for a business purpose. So although we made some recommendations, there's nothing that we felt we had to highlight and that we're really nervous about. So we followed up on some of our previous recommendations. 6 of the previous recommendations have been closed out, and there's another 13 that still needs to be closed out. So Anton will just talk a bit about some of the work that we brought forward that we normally do in our final audits, and just give a bit of a report back on that.
Thank you, councillors. So the council revalued this year the marine, the 3 waters, that's the stormwater, wastewater and drinking water assets, and the transportation infrastructure. This was revalued effectively 1st of July 2018. And this is a very large piece of work because that's the bulk of your assets and requires significant effort both from council staff and from us as auditors. As Clarence mentioned, management was very proactive and ensured the revaluations were completed significantly earlier this year than had been done in the prior years. One of the findings we found is that overall the values had increased quite significantly compared to the past. So just to make sure we were happy with the reasons for that, we completed unit rate testing This is basically comparing what the valuer has said the unit rates are compared to recent contracts or supplier listings. So we found no issues. One of the key drivers is the overall just general inflation, and there are other uplifts in the construction industry. For example, the health and safety to deal with that has cost the construction industry quite a lot of money, and that's passed through into your contract costs. We are pleased to advise that we have completed this work with no major issues identified, and we just commend management for the effort put into those revals. We also noted the valuers were very complimentary on the improvements they found on the information and data they had received compared to the last revaluation, but they also in their reports included further improvements, and we supported their recommendations. We also received a copy of the refreshed design and layout of the annual report for this year, and and the updates specifically around the financial statements in the annual report. The main changes is that the design includes moving accounting policies to the actual note rather than having all the policies in one place and the note somewhere else. And we believe that that makes it for easier reading and with a better flow to the report. So I suppose if there's any questions, Clarence and I are available for those now.
Stewart, and then Councillor Kurak and Mason. Yep.
Thank you. Through the chair, on page 89, if I can just read out paragraph 2 under control environment. It says management with the oversight of those charged with governance need to establish and maintain a culture of honesty and ethical behaviour through implementation of policies, procedures and monitoring controls. And then in 2 paragraphs down, it says we consider a culture of honesty and ethical behaviour has been created. So can you just comment on that? Because in one it looks like you're looking for it, and then in the third one you're saying it's been created. Or am I reading it not quite right?
So what we're trying to say is that the control environment is made up of all the attitudes and awareness and all of that, and that we found that based on what we saw, that you have that culture in the organisation, therefore it's created, it exists. That's what we're trying to say.
That's good to hear, thank you. And then on page 94, you refer to sensitive expenditure and P card. Can you just explain what P stands for, please?
So that will be your purchase card.
Okay. And one other question, if I may. Once you do this report, do staff have any input in it, or is it totally independent?
So the report that we write is totally independent. We do get management comments, and that is where they then have the opportunity to reflect on what we've asked. Sometimes it is a matter when that we work on some of the wording, because I mean, when we say something and you read it cold, it may mean something different. So we do get the management to have their input into it as well. But it's our report.
Thanks, guys. Page 90 of the report, paragraph 2.3 in your report, controls to reduce the risk of wrongdoing. I would have expected to see some reference to like protected disclosures or the whistleblowing services in terms of, you know, the council's one and its effectiveness, or the staff awareness of such an opportunity to make a disclosure without compromising themselves or anything. Do you look at that or not? And if not, is that something perhaps you should?
So with part of the bribery and corruption and wrongdoing, we do look at all the whistleblowing and sensitive expenditure, all those policies that may have an impact on this. So definitely we do look at that. And I think, did we make some recommendations on that? Can't remember, but normally if there is any shortcomings, there will be recommendations made on that, maybe to strengthen the policy or change some of the wording, but definitely we do look into that.
In terms of staff awareness, are you aware that it is readily or promoted to a certain extent, and the staff have got a reasonable knowledge of doing so if they identify something in the organisation that doesn't look right, that there is such a service?
So we do look at the induction and how available the policies are. So on the intranet and the latest policies and how often it gets reviewed and that sort of thing, and reiterated into the staff and made aware of it. So overall, yes, we do look at that and make sure that it is updated and communicated.
Thank you for the report. Could I ask if the revaluation of assets with Three Waters and others have an implication on depreciation?
Thank you. Yes, it will actually have an implication because as the cost to replace it goes up, so your depreciation cost goes up. So you have to consider that as part of your future funding.
I guess I'll start. What is the likely impact of that?
Through the chair, like any increase in asset value without a corresponding change in useful life will obviously impact the depreciation value going forward. And we bring that back to you as part of each annual plan, long-term plan process, effectively what that might look like, together with an overall analysis of the value of the reserve. Very long life assets, particularly underground assets, we actually look at the total balance of the reserve and whether there's sufficient value. So we don't necessarily fully fund in the first instance because we look to see whether it actually, how it balances over time and bring back which in the annual plan is why we discounted some of the depreciation funding within there because there was sufficient balance in the reserve to cover. So we bring that back as a comprehensive package of what we need to fund going forward. No, that's right. But I think it's fair to say that there is an increase in asset values, puts more pressure on depreciation over time. There's, and we're seeing that across most of our asset bases. It overall does add pressure to that depreciation number because renewal costs will go up going forward.
Chair, that we haven't actually got a pressure across our waters depreciation, and that partly reflects moving slightly more slowly to budget on the actual delivery, and partly the extension of life of some of the assets as well. So it is quite a cooking pot of results, so there's no significant impact at this stage.
Clarence, just on the sensitive expenditure, can you give us an idea of? You're obviously only doing a sample of all the transactions. So what kind of level of sample is it that brings up those issues?
So I would say in total, most probably 30 transactions that we looked at, 30. So we look at overall, with the focus this year was on air and CE expenses. So that was the bulk of our testing was focused on that, based on what happened in some other entities. So that was just our approach, and then normally we do a flick through your general ledger accounts just to get a feel for it, and then, as I say, go into detail for some testing.
A couple of questions, if I may. You mentioned under 2.3, Councillor Kurak referred to it, controls to reduce the risk of wrongdoing. Conflicts of interest are often a significant consideration. Certainly the Auditor General spoke in Hamilton earlier this year on that issue. Our process here is one of self-identification, particularly for elected members. So elected members choose to decide whether they've got a conflict of interest. My view is that's slightly too narrow and has a risk attached. Do you have a view on that? Because it's a policy issue that sits inside, obviously, the Code of Conduct, again, as you referred to in 2.3. So do you have any comment, as I say, on the self-identification issue around conflict of interest and whether there's a better or safer, or whether that's an acceptable way of dealing with that risk?
So there's good guidance at the OAG on conflicts of interest, and I would recommend going to that specific guidance and to have a read through that. We won't criticize your policies and procedures. That's not for what we hear. If we think that there's something that highlights the risk or increases the risk, then we'll definitely, in specific instances, look at how that was dealt with.
Second question, if I may, Your Worship. Work in progress, again, there's a degree of how one treats these things. We have a situation in a number of projects where we're carrying significant work in progress. Do you give guidance as to at what point in a project's life or slow death that what's sitting in, thanks for the smile, at what point we should actually be transferring those amounts effectively to expenditure and recognizing that this is no longer an asset but in fact a cost?
So as part of our audit, we do look into your work in progress. We look at when assets are capitalized. We look at your capitalization policies. First of all, for expenses to be work in progress, we look at the standards to make sure that, first of all, they align with what the standards allow you to capitalize. Then secondly, what we do is from year to year, we look at projects that started, finished, capitalized, or started, no capitalization happened, and no further expenditure was actually incurred on that project, and then assess based on materiality. So we go into a bit more detail on specific projects to make sure that what should be capitalized has been capitalized. But at the end of the day, we look at evidence to see. We can't say, for instance, you've got a project on the go, no further project or no cost was incurred, so that hasn't been capitalized, say you have to expense it, because we don't know, maybe you're waiting, so we listen to what the reasons for not capitalizations are, maybe you're waiting for resource consent or there's hold-ups. So based on that, we then accept it, but we will revisit it year on year going forward as well.
Forward to some of that next year.
Further to Councillor Robson's query around conflicts of interest, and I think that was mainly in respect of elected members, but in terms of staff, the organisational policy around conflicts of interest, disclosures, having a register, etc., that's freely available. Are you happy with the policy and procedures currently employed at TCC?
So at the moment, when we look at, for instance, procurement, you look at the whole process of how conflict of interest are declared, and at the moment, to answer the question, yes, we are comfortable with how it is handled and what's in your policies.
The resolution has been moved by Councillor Robson. Is there a second to Councillor Clout? And would you like to speak to it, Councillor?
I think the report's self-evident. We get these on a regular basis. They provide significant value. The focus, it's important to remember, is really, as identified in the report, sort of process and control. Obviously, what's covered in the annual report is significantly bigger, deeper, wider than that. So just because you wind up with a nice report from audit in this regard doesn't mean that everything is wonderful in the garden. I think that's an important thing to remember. But appreciate the work as ever done by Clarence and Anton and the team, and obviously staff.
Yeah, I just note that Clarence and Anton have noted that our staff have been very cooperative with the process, and also they've noticed some significant improvements in our operations and processes, so that's very pleasing to see as well, notwithstanding the comments that Councillor Robson has just given to us. Thank you.
Speakers? Okay, so I'll put that all in favour, say, write a reply if you wanted, but no. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? So that's carried. Just trying to work out the timing for the rest of our meetings that we've got. Thank you very much, Clarence and Anton and staff. Yep, folks, it's probably best that we adjourn for an hour. I was trying to sort of save a bit of time here and there, but it's not going to work out with the timings of our speakers. So we'll adjourn our meeting now. At 1 o'clock when we resume, we will go into the UFTI meeting and in the open section, and we will save the council confidential till later. Yeah. Councillor Morris?
Obviously, due to the delay, a member of the public is coming here at 1 o'clock to speak in the public forum of the Policy Committee.
Okay, so, in that case, we could,
may need to be arranged between Councillor Baldock and myself, whether with his indulgence that person can speak.
Sorry, I thought it was with Councillor, with the UFTI committee, but the public speaker is here for policy. So we'll start at 1 o'clock with policy and adjourn so that we can hear your speaker. And then we'll change the meetings as works out more practical for the public. Okay, so yes, Councillor Kurak.
But in terms of the notification, was there a certain order? Should we perhaps open the UFTI meeting, adjourn it, and then have the policy brought?
We can do whatever is procedurally correct. Yeah. Okay, so we're adjourned till 1 o'clock sharp. Thanks.